All right, bottom box of that first page of the 1-5 notes here, and it says to simplify. And this time we've got a radical, but the number inside of it isn't just -1. It's -25. And so we got to think back. How do we simplify radicals? And there's a few different ways to do these. Sometimes folks will use the tree method, and they'll go, okay, well, -25, that's -1, and 25, and 25, that's 5 and 5, and so I have the square root of -1 times the square root of 5 times the square root of 5, and oh hey, square root of 5 times square root of 5 is 5, and then times the square root of -1, and that's just I. That's one method that folks will use for these, and if you've used that before, there you go. You also might see people using the upside down cake method. So negative 25, and what are the factors that go out of that? Well, I can factor out a -1, and on this you don't use um, all your prime numbers and just the -1 there to get that out. So positive 25 gives 5, and 25 divided by 5 leaves you with 5, and divide that by 5 gives you 1, and there's kind of like a candle. That's why sometimes folks call it the upside down cake method. Again, these are all the square root of, and as you said, the square root of 5 times the square root of 5 is just 5, and the square root of -1 is I. So again, we get to 5I. The ones that we'll start using now, because those first few times when you're just learning to simplify radicals, those are a little more graphical in nature. But we want to get a bit more technical now. And so we can either write this as just all of its factors. And so the square root of -1 times the square root of 5 times the square root of 5. And we want to be able to get to this without having to use a tree or a cake or whatever. We want to be able to do this fairly straightforward, just realizing that these pieces multiplied together, these radicals multiplied together, give us the square root of -25. And here we can see that the square root of 5 times the square root of 5, there's still our 5, and the square root of 1 is still I. Last method for here, and then we'll get going, is looking for breaking up your radical. We'll keep everything in here, but breaking it into your different perfect squares. And people either will write it actually as a square, so 5 squared, that's 25 times -1, or instead of writing it as 5 squared, write it actually as 25, and seeing what perfect squares you have inside of your square root, so that when you take the square root of 25, that's 5, and then the square root of -1, that's I. So a number of different ways there to get to 5I. And I do apologize for rushing at the beginning, just assuming we've got that part sorted out. And if not, please do just pause and go back through that. And I think that with a bit of pausing and rewinding, you can sort that out. So B, got the same idea here. We're going to break it up into its factors, and there's no perfect squares that go in here. And so really we're just left with that -1 times 23. Um, the -21 we can pull out as an I, but the square root, this 23 doesn't simplify at all. So it's the square root of 23I times the square root of 23. You may see folks write that at times as the square root of 23I, and I'm going to really highly recommend against that, having that I after the radical, because it becomes unclear. Are they trying to say that this is the square root of 23 times I, or is that radical actually extend on and it's part of your radicand as well? So highly, highly, highly recommend that you put your I out in front of the radical. All right, last one. We're going to add and subtract our complex numbers here. And for all intents and purposes, treat I, what it is really is just you're going to combine your like terms. Not that I is a variable, it's not, it's constant, it's always equal to the square root of -1. But look for your like terms and combine them. So we're going to have 2 plus 3I. We're going to work through in our order of operations, and adding doesn't happen. First we need to do parentheses, but there's nothing inside the parentheses we can do. So we move on to exponents. There's no exponents to deal with. And then well, there are exponents in the I itself. It's the square root of -1, but there's nothing we can do with that at this point. And so then we move on to multiplication division and distribute out this -1. So it's 2 plus 3i minus 4, and then -1 times -3i is plus 3i. Combine our constants first. We have 2 minus 4, that's -2. And then 3i plus 3i is plus 6i. All right, there we go, and I hope that helps.